Hi, this is Ron Oldmans with the Self-Aware Leader, brought to you by Lead Skill. That was pretty chirpy. I just want to say I'm grateful for you joining us. And if you're catching this live, let us know where you're joining us from and what brought you here. And if you're catching on replay, I would love to see you say something in the comments for us, and just let us know what your interest is in the topic. Today, we're talking about self-regulation and how to improve it. And so I'm going to be joined here by Angela Oldmans.
Hello. Okay.
Hey. So self-regulation, this is kind of it's a big term, I think, and people hear that and they're like, self-regulation. I'd say it's really self-control.
Mm.
Maybe the more everyday term that we use is how do you practice self-control? Do you have self-control? And how does that play into emotional intelligence? So that's our topic for today. And we're going to be exploring different parts of that.
So for me, I became aware that I do not have much self-regulation / self-control when I am under much duress. When I feel I just feel afraid. When I'm afraid, I don't regulate very well. So a case in point, when I was teaching in a high school, I had a bunch of kids. They were really testing me. And of course, the seasoned teachers would say, send them to detention. And me being an older teacher joining the profession at that time, I was thinking, I don't think that is the solution because they're all juniors and seniors. They are going to go launch off into the world, at that juncture in their life. Sending them to detention was not the answer. And helping them control their emotions and all the nonsense they throw at us teachers.
Mm-hmm.
What they really wanted is someone older, calmer, to be an example of peace and to be able to calmly respond regardless of what they throw at us. And I can tell you that was a great daily exercise of learning to be self-control, and yeah. But I
So for
knew,
you, self-regulation, self-control is a real challenge when
yeah.
you're afraid, when you feel threatened. Is that
Mhm, mhm.
right? And
Yes.
yet, at the same time, I would say something that you do really well, something that you practice great self-control at that I'm lousy at is when you're criticized, you tend to handle it with a lot of the word that came up is equanimity, but that's a pretty, that's a big word, but it's like you just have a lot of poise and you're very self-controlled, you're very balanced whenever you're criticized. But for
Mhm.
me, when I'm criticized, it just gets under my skin and I tend to be defensive, or I can be aggressive, too, in some situations. But it's like, man, I do not handle criticism well. And that's just where I am.
But this is just a facade, right? So remember a couple of months ago when we took some time to go to the beach, and we happened to, got to be at the beach at a late hour, and we saw Jupiter. And you were describing to me that Jupiter is a mass of hot air and just gaseous, it's really volatile planet. And all I see is this beautiful planet, through the microscope, through the binoculars. And so I really am like Jupiter. It looks peaceful on the outside, but I'm all over. But I have to learn to breathe and realize it's not about me. And then to remind myself I can come from love.
Okay.
So I can come from love. I am triggered. I am triggered. I mean, I do not receive, there are many things said toward me or about people, about the world that I could easily fly off and be really angry about. But
So you're saying you don't handle criticism as well as you appear to be?
um, it hurt me. It hurts me. Yeah, I just don't see the need to fire off. What does that produce?
Which I I think that brings us really to the central point about self-regulation. Um, the question for me is, can you really stop yourself from feeling something? Is that what self-regulation is? That you kind of like shut down the feeling?
Oh,
Or is
mhm.
self-regulation more about you feel it, you feel things, and you're not shutting down your feeling, but your feeling isn't running you. The
I
feeling
know.
is not in the driver's seat controlling you.
So I know the answer, but I'd like to hear from you, Ron. Since
Well, you're excited. I mean, if you know
yeah,
the answer, I'd love it.
you're the
I posed a
expert.
question. Why don't you take a whack at it, and then
No,
I'll
you're the
give you my
expert in all
take.
these definitions. Okay, yeah. No, I feel it. I don't shut down. I am totally like about to like lose it. I think that's a word that they used, the younger people used to describe my generation. We call, people like that Karens, and we can lose it.
Well, there was a song of our generation. I think it was Donna Summer, but I'm not sure. But it was like, "I'm so excited, and I just can't hide it. I'm about to lose control, and I think I like it." Right? And it's like,
Yeah,
so I'm about to lose it. I'm about to lose control. I'm about to just
yeah.
go, ballistic. Usually it's angry, but I'm about to lose it, meaning I'm about to lose kind of like my ability to govern myself, to control what I'm holding inside.
So I think every parent should try and do a gig at public school teaching, because really, I think so, because it helped me become a better parent, at least those brief years that I was in public school
Oh, I
teaching.
think there's a lot of teachers who would, say, yeah, I'd like to see that too, but I don't think, parents like we're professionals, it's like it's uh
Because what happens is that when you have kids coming at you and because most of us, when we're adults, we talk to adults who are professional and able to contain themselves and, regulate their emotions.
yeah.
Sure, emotions do fly, and we do want to avoid someone, you know, in the hallway, and we do want to, and those things do happen. We know who has the ballers have tempers, but by and large, most adults have it under control in professional settings, but not in a high school or middle school where kids are just kids. So that's was great training ground for me to teach me how to. I felt things deeply, but I need to ask myself, where am I coming from? What am I out to accomplish here in this situation? And um, yeah, those are the two things that I think of. What am I, out to accomplish here? And one of the things that I um, advocated back then was like, we cannot advocate peace if we are not peace bearers ourselves. So when I don't know, I think most people regulate themselves pretty well professionally. What do you think, Ron?
Um my observation is, I mean, part of just being human, having just a little bit of social skills, personal skills, is that we can regulate ourselves. And if you don't regulate yourself, um, we have all sorts of labels for it, like, behavioral disorders, or people who just, have outbursts. And, we say, oh, like that's, that's awkward, or, man, they just don't have a filter. They don't have good regulation. So I think a lot of us have a functional level, and here's, I think, where it kind of gets more real is, as a leader, I think leaders are under more pressure, more stress, more eyes are on them. And by the way, part of my definition of a leader is like a teacher. A teacher is a leader. A teacher absolutely should be the leader in their classroom. Because if a teacher is not the leader, that means the strongest voice, the strongest personality in the room is leading and pacing and in control. And therefore, a lot of times learning's not going to happen. And you've seen this, I know. It's like you have some clown, you have some person who's a charmer, you have someone who's a disruptor. If there's not a teacher in that room who's leading and doing what we call, good classroom management, then it's really hard for anyone else in that room to really learn. So coming back, just stepping out of the education standpoint, a leader is someone who's able to really, I think, step up to the stress and regulate on a, like a higher level, or it's like more than a common level of self-regulation.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree, or do you have another perspective on that?
Yeah, pretty much.
So I was asking the question, can you really stop yourself from feeling something? And is that even the goal of self-regulation? So maybe we should just take a step back and, what is self-regulation? We started this conversation talking about it. Here's a definition. Maybe we can unpack this a little bit. Self-regulation is the ability to control or redirect disruptive impulses and moods. And at the same time, it's the ability to suspend judgment and think before acting.
I would say my 20s and even my 30s, it was a period of my time where I learned to self-regulate. Because I grew up in a pretty structured conformist society, Singapore. So in the classroom and the lecture theaters, we are all pretty harmonious. So I didn't have to really look at volatile emotions or have emotions erupt like I've seen here in the US, where, people, they believe in something, they go and demonstrate. They would fly to different cities to demonstrate.
Mm-hmm.
Call to the US. I was like, wow, wowed by the civicness. What is the word? With the amount of passion they have behind causes that would have them go to cities and do demonstrations. So I never had that. So I never thought of myself as having, impulses or emotions that are haywire. It's only in my 20s when I went to a new place that I realized there are things that are unchecked, and I need to investigate that a little bit more. And certainly when I became a parent, after the beautiful, cute of phase of the children that season is over, and they become little people. And I needed to really learn how to regulate my emotions, you know, because I was committed to create a peaceful home.
And I can tell you that, you came to the US in the 90s, mid 90s, thereabouts. I grew up in the US, in the 70s and 80s. And I don't think it's always been like what you described. Probably more than, what you saw in Asia. I mean, obviously, since the 60s, we've had youth and young people demonstrating, marching, and, doing that sort of thing. But I would just say, for example, my generation, um, it's not like I was encouraged, or a lot of people around me were very outspoken and spoke up. I think, I grew up in an environment where people were, saying, no, you need to kind of know your place. You have to, have self-control. You have to, you know, conduct yourself in a way that is, you've got a handle on yourself. And it's not like we were encouraged to speak out, speak up, and that you saw that happen just a lot. I mean, in the 70s and 80s, the media was still kind of in the hands of the elite, network stations, big newspapers. It was, before the internet. If people watch Stranger Things, in about the 80s, that's a little slice, it's little pictures. Like a lot of things were analog. It wasn't like we had the internet or social media or all the different ways that have democratized people, like, communicating, coordinating, expressing their views, getting it out there. It wasn't like that. But it's become a lot more that way. And I think things like mobile phones, hand phones, smartphones, social media, all the different ways, it actually challenges us in some ways about our self-regulation, our self-control. And there was a study I saw recently. It's like the average person with a smartphone actually looks at their smartphone. You want to make a guess how many times people look at their smartphone in a day?
No, that kind of data doesn't serve me. So but you can share.
It 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 runs up to the hundreds of times we look at our smartphone. And it's like, I mean, the average person. So it's like, to me, and I stop and think like, no, I'm sure I don't do that. I'm sure I don't look at my smartphone hundreds of times a day. And then I have to stop and think, well, okay, just this morning, how many times have I looked at my smartphone? Wow, tens of times, and it's like, and over a course of a day, yeah, probably a lot more than I realize.
But you also
And
practice something that's really good right now, which is you have a timer on your phone to interrupt. Can you say more about that?
say more about what? About the
Having a
timer on my
timer,
phone?
yeah. What
I'm not
caused
using the timer that much
that?
myself. I mean, occasionally, but like I noticed just this week you started setting timers like every half hour, hour and a half, or something like that. So, um, is that something you're trying to experiment with? Because I don't use the timer that much.
Yeah, I do, but I know that every time your phone always ring, and that's what gave me the idea to start having putting timers on my throughout the day. Of course, mine is more at a more frequent level than yours, but I was curious about you having you started this practice because I hear the phone ring. Yeah.
Couple times a day. So I think initially I had like three reminders, like in the mid morning, midday, mid afternoon, about every
Mhm.
3 hours, just to kind of like help me, ask what am I doing right now, and kind of do a check in and
Okay.
see, yeah, like, uh, do I need to do I want to continue doing what I'm doing, or do I need to stop and practice a little bit of mindfulness? It's like
Mhm.
pause,
Mhm.
breathe, and okay, reorient, realign. And I found that too too much. So I dialed it back. I think I have like two reminders now a day.
How has it been helpful to you before, prior to using this practice versus not before? What have you noticed about the change for you in the way how you manage your time each day?
In a small way, it's an attempt on my part to use technology to serve me instead of me serving my technology, meaning like, the phone, like looking at the social media scroll, getting lost in things, or, um, you know, looking at my phone just to check on either
Mhm.
messaging to me or emails or whatever. And it's like, okay, use, for example, the timer just to help me do that check in. It's helped me by, I think, being a little more, just a little aware of what I'm doing, and not just going through the day, because I have a tendency to kind of get very into my work, get very absorbed in something, and then it's like, oh wow, where'd the time go? And it's like, I need to come back to, you know, what is my purpose? What are my goals? Am I accomplishing things? Am I on time? Really kind of all the things that are part of self-regulation, self-management. So
Yeah.
maybe I'm doing a little bit better, just being a little more aware. And I think that's part of the relationship between we increase our awareness in order to increase our self-control.
Hmm. I think it depends on the kind of work that you're involved in, because there are some, it was very easy to have 10 things I need to get accomplished for the day. And I just check those boxes. And when those boxes are checked, I know that I've accomplished what I needed to do for the day. But right now in the season of my life, I do a lot of creative work, and you cannot rush creativity. So I do, you know, uh, what you said, you get lost in it. I get absorbed in my work, but I have other duties that call me, that other responsibilities. And so I realized I want to produce more things aside from the things that has no end time, because it's creative. You stop only when the thing looks good. And so that's where the timer comes in for me, to answer your question. And like I said, just started experimenting. I'm kind of annoyed at the amount of time that I spaced between different reminders. I think it's too close, because it's interrupting too many of my thoughts when I wanted to be just in the zone. I need to work around and come up with a schedule that works for me. So I'm learning to regulate in a
So are those
way.
timers that we're hearing going off, or is that someone trying to call you?
As the time is going off, and I'm still learning how to use this timer real well, because this is a new season, like I said, like in my life, where I'm not just doing 10 things and I can knock them down, because all those 10 things require a certain amount of time. It's not open-ended like creative work. Creative work is open-ended, and I can get lost in it. And that's why I'm using the timer to regulate my time better, and also regulate my emotions, because it feels pretty terrible when you are laboring over something. At the end of it is just, maybe 300 words, and 7 hours went by, and then you're like, oh wow, that's.
Angela, I think some people resist self-regulation and this whole conversation about it, especially in the creative space, because they think of, trying to control, for example, your time, or control things too much, like will stifle or, contain your creativity, or kill it. So what do you find?
No, you have to have limits, and that's one of the things that uh I don't know. If I think it almost sometimes forces you to be super creative. So I remember when I first signed on to become a public school teacher here in Texas, and the season teachers tell me, like, you only have 10 minutes of the attention. I was like, this is a 15-minute period. And just they only have 10 minutes for you. So do your thing. And I was like, if you don't engage them in that 8-10 minutes, done. And with cell
So you
phones and
don't actually
checking.
have 50 minutes of rapt attention of students sitting at their desk with their hands folded and they're like looking at you.
Maybe the AP classes, or in classes like CTE classes, where the kids really want to do cosmetology or law enforcement. They really want to, but then still you still have kids who have to take that class because they need a credit. So
Yeah.
no, not everyone is that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, so what it did for me was that I kind of like the practice. It was like, yes. So if I don't have the luxury I want to produce every day for my own sanity, emotional wellness. I love producing something creative every day. So I need to look at, like, what is it that I can produce today, that whether if I have 8 things to do, what is something short that I can just whip it out fast? And if something long, then other things need to go away, and I give myself the luxury of time. So I always plan my week ahead, my month ahead, to look at what are the essentials I want to get done this month, this week. And that is how I regulate my time.
Okay.
Because when I regulate my time well and I get things done, it promotes my emotional wellness because I feel accomplished versus a ton of incompletes.
So,
Yeah.
I, we're talking about regulation and self-regulation, and I think there's a little bit of an overlap because part of this, a subset of self-regulation is also like goal orientation and motivation and how well you manage things toward a particular outcome, how well you accomplish goals. Do you persevere? Do you stick with it? Do you get sidelined or distracted? And how do you kind of like get yourself back in line when something does pull you off course? So I just want to mention that motivation is a kind of separate aspect we could look at within emotional intelligence. And so we're trying to focus on self-regulation more on like managing the disruptive emotions, or not even just disruptive, but just managing your emotions, period. And that aspect of self-regulation.
Yeah. So I see the slide that you have. Do you want to go into this slide or
I'm
what?
not sure which one, but
The,
throw up what you're curious about and we can have a conversation about it.
the 5 dimensions of EQ, is that what? Yeah.
Yeah. Emotional intelligence can be like, it's a big field, and to me it's helpful if we can see things in these different domains. And so we talked last week about self-awareness. We did a self-awareness deep dive, and if you didn't catch that, go back and look at episode 9. Maybe there'll be some interesting things in there for you. So in this episode, we're talking about self-regulation, which builds on that foundation of awareness. But there's a special aspect of self-regulation, which is motivation, that I just mentioned, is how well you are motivated and stay on track and see things through with perseverance, even though you might be distracted or things come up, obstacles come in the way. And then in future, times we'll look at the social side of things, social
What
awareness,
happens
social
when
motivation.
I feel something on command?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Yeah, I just typed it in. Can you feel something on command? What would your answer be?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Say more, please.
Well, when you asked the question, were you assuming that you can't, or that it's difficult, or where were you coming from with the question? Kind of like, what is your assumption behind it?
I understand the question on my from where I am, but I want to know, what do you mean by give me a context and example, what you're saying. Can you feel, so if your answer is yes, so give me an example so that I can understand where
Well,
you're
let's back
coming
up.
from.
Let's assume that I didn't
Yeah.
answer your question yet. I didn't say yes, so I was too quick. But like, where are you coming from when you ask the question, can you feel it on command? Is there a particular
Yes.
interest on your part, or is there like even a tendency to not believe it's possible to do it, or do you think you can do it, or what?
So I'm looking at this quote right now by Hermann Hesse, who is, I believe, is a German Swiss philosopher. He wrote Siddhartha. What we can and should change is of ourselves. I put it on my LinkedIn Tuesday quote. Our impatience, our egoism, including intellectual egoism, our sense of injury, our lack of love and forbearance. I regard every other attempt to change the world, even if it springs from the best intentions, as futile. And I'm really cognizant of us going to the holiday season and meeting different people, or even when out and about, just retail staff, or just, everybody, tempers will sometimes fly, especially in the parking lot, or I've seen a lot of impatient people. And so, can you feel something on command? What is the thing that I am commanding myself to feel this season?
Oh,
Thanksgiving is thankfulness. Christmas is about love. So what I'm committed to feeling, that I command myself to feel, are those feelings. Those feelings are the dominant feelings I want to feel this season. So anything that doesn't come up, that tests my my emotions, that makes me frustrated, I'm not going to let it out, because not that I'm holding it in. I'm just going to learn to change myself first from what Herman Hesse says.
I th- I think
That's
that
what I mean in that regard.
yeah, I get it. Thanks for sharing that
Mhm,
context. That's helpful.
mhm,
I think there's a resistance, a widespread resistance from a lot of people to think that we can actually feel something on command. When you asked me the question, I just answered it off, straight off, like, yes, we can. It's because I've thought about this for a while, and I mean, just think about actors,
mm,
actresses,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I told you I cannot be an actor or actress. Yes, I can't. No.
And yet, very few of us can be professional actors and actresses. But you know what? Every day we are acting. Every day.
Mhm,
As a teacher in the classroom, you had to act,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
Whenever a kid did something outlandish or a student did something that's like, totally set you off, you had to keep this poker face, this professional demeanor, and not be triggered by it, right? You had to command yourself to like not fly off in a rage or an anger, or like, put them in their place.
Yeah.
And that's not just teachers. I think in our world today, it's like we all have to be actors. We all have to, exercise like self-control, don't telegraph what I'm truly feeling, because there are social situations every day when it's very inconvenient. It's very out of place to telegraph what you really feel.
Interesting. Yeah, you're right. So for me, signposts help. And explain what signposts. And when you talk about public school
Yeah.
teaching, so SBAC, I can't remember what it stands for, but it's the State Board for Education here.
Okay.
And so they one of the things that they before they give you the license, they would say very clear, they expect you not just to conduct yourself at the best of who you are as a professional in the classroom, but also outside. So that little thing just kind of caught my attention. So I started in a different way. I'm not just a mom or just a resident in my community, but I'm actually someone in a community that's doing a public service. So how I conduct myself, even at the retail store, means something, you know. And so that was something, a new awareness for me that I never thought about. Okay. And so I'm looking through it. That's one example. Second example is looking at my the oath of allegiance when I became naturalized as a citizen in the U.S. More than a decade and a half ago. And when I studied the oath of allegiance again, I was like, wow, this is what I promised to do for this country.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful to have that signpost and to read it again, so that I can check my spirit and my actions. Like, am I truly an American here?
Mm,
So,
okay.
you know, so and so so signposts, what I'm saying is signposts help us feel, or these quote that I just shared, it help us feel something on command.
Yes.
Because we don't have a tendency to go and say, I'm going to feel noble now, I'm going to feel selfless now, I'm going to come from love even when darts are coming at me. So I do not make a good, I cannot do military, I cannot be in combat. you know I admire that people are able to dissociate. It's hard. I know it's hard. That's why.
Yeah.
So so if some of us normal citizens, we're not in combat, if we can just train ourselves to feel what I would call the noble emotions on command, maybe this holiday season might be a new kind. Maybe 2023 might be a new world that we can all usher in. I'm a very idealist in that point. So this is what I'm dealing with: difficult, disturbing, disruptive emotions, because they seem to get louder and louder, Ron. I just have to say this. I don't remember a time, maybe because I'm getting older, but I don't know about you. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. But I find it's getting harder to shut off the difficult, disturbing, and disruptive emotions.
When you say noble emotions, I'm curious if you're able to share a couple that come to mind. What are noble emotions?
I don't know if the fruit of the spirit, some of the characters, the personal, not characters, the nine traits that I could think of: love, joy, peace, self-control, patience. I can't remember all the nine. I'm sorry.
Those are like virtues then. So when you say noble emotions,
Yes,
it would be the emotions that go along with basically virtuous character, like
yes,
patience or forbearance or kindness, showing kindness to other people. And I think
yes,
that's really hard. Well, it's hard for me. I'll speak for myself. It's really hard for me to feel kind, but if I put that aside, I
yes.
can certainly act kind, or I can do a kind thing.
Mm,
And I
mm.
think sometimes what we have to do is do the behavior and not wait for the feeling. It's like we have to do the behavior
Ah,
and the
yeah.
feeling follows along behind.
Yes, yes. You're right. I am not I'm sorry. I'm not, I remember when we were in Florence and I saw the Hare Krishna people walk by, and I just like, wow, they're just like wafting on air, it seems like, as they dance about in the tambourine. And I'm like, wow. And I'm not that. I mean, I have lots of disruptive, disturbing, difficult emotions. I'm I guess I'm a typical normal human being. And so to cultivate these qualities or to have them, I got to do them first, and then I could feel.
I
And I
like what
feel
you
love.
said.
Yeah. So end up feeling love for a lot of my disruptive kids.
I like what you said a moment ago about command yourself to feel the noble emotions on demand. I think if anything, what I might tweak that just a little bit and say
Mhm.
it's the first thing to do is I think that's a good practice, by the way. But I think it's a little hard for me to access it, to feel them on demand, especially in the moment. But I
Mm.
certainly can choose to practice some of these virtues, virtuous behavior or character, traits,
Yeah.
and then let the emotion kind of trail along behind it.
Yeah.
If I will do kind things, I will probably start feeling more kindness inside. And if I do more things to demonstrate patience or forbearance, I'll probably be a little less agitated or irritated or annoyed at people over time.
Yeah.
Huh. That you've actually given me a good point here to think about, because I'm like, I think I'm not alone here. That I've often said, well, I don't I don't feel kind, right now. So, and therefore I let myself off the hook from having to act kind or to do a kind thing, behaving that way. And it's absolutely optional. It's not necessary to feel it in order to do it. In fact, often you have to do it before you feel it.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Wow, that gives me a new insight into self-regulation and self-control, because that really is kind of elevating the game to another level of, like not letting ourselves off the hook. And I think this is part of the call to leadership. Leaders have to take the lead, have to take the initiative and show people, like, okay, we're not at the mercy of our feelings or emotions. We have choice, and we have to move ahead, and we have to, take action sometimes, even when we're not feeling it.
Yeah, the command. So I think that some you were telling me some, CEOs and leaders, they are like some people are like get back to work, everybody, to the physical location. And some people are having the hybrid models. I think whichever this spectrum is, there is an avoidance of something. So for those of people who want to stay at home, they probably want to avoid the unpleasant environment they are in. So they're like, I'm fine just working at home because I get the job done. Going back to work, they need to almost summon themselves up to command themselves to feel the noble emotions, so that to command. But sometimes maybe at work, it's another opportunity to cultivate the noble emotions. And that's hard. And I think what people are begging for from leaders is like, can we just have a balance? Because every day having to summon up positivity vibes, can't do it. But maybe some days I just want to get my work done at home. I don't know. So we are on different paths of self-regulating. I think that's why I admire you for leading this conversation on emotions, regulating it, controlling it, managing it, because you're aware there are many more working options today.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just very short-sighted. CEOs or leaders, managers for that, matter, who are ordering people like return to the office. And when I'm saying that, I'm saying like, the assumption behind it is if you're working from home, you're not really working. You're not really getting the work done. Like
Yeah.
Elon Musk, it was in the news recently of, ordering all the Twitter employees to get back to the office, just like he had done a few weeks or months ago with Tesla. It's like ordering all the, employees. And we're not talking about front, if you're working on the assembly line, you have to be in the factory, right, to do the work. We're talking about people who could be doing their job remotely, not in the office. And so, the assumption by leaders that people are only working if they're in the office, I think is like very short-sighted. And it overlooks one, that some people can be very productive outside of the office, and a lot larger group of people could be productive in a hybrid arrangement where I spend some time in the office and I get to spend some time remote or at home if that's where they want to work from, remotely. And just being able to like tune in to the fact that people can regulate themselves better when they have options and when they feel like they're more in control. And commanding everyone across the board return to office is not putting your workers in a position where they feel like they have some amount of control. It's making them kind of like, okay, you're just cogs in the machine. You're just robots. It's like, I just need your warm body in the office. And it's like, but are people really productive? Are they really contributing, there by the simple fact that they're physically in the office, ignoring the fact of the hour and a half long commute to get there, the stress of arranging childcare and taking all the stuff, in that they've, had to do to get themselves there.
I don't know much about Elon Musk and his work, except name that trends and the outlandish things that he did that my sons would tell me during the pandemic times when they were home. So I don't know much. So for
He's
me,
just a public figure, but I would say that
but
there's thousands
to
of
be,
Elon Musk, that are behaving the same way and using the same sort of, actions. And so really this broadcast is not directed to Elon. I'm not calling him out. He's probably not concerned about what I'm saying, but it's really for the leaders and the people who are impacted by the same kind of thinking, the same sort of actions.
well, then I appreciate you correcting that, because for me, if there's a leader like that, I'll be interested to come in to interview, because I'm an interviewer. I can ask questions from the floor to the upper management if that's the right arrangement. So,
Yeah.
I believe in talking to people and getting information and from that regard, and making then the analysis and letting people draw the conclusions themselves based on the answers. So because I'm from Asia, I mean, I grew up with a dad that ran factories in Indonesia and
Mhm.
Singapore,
Yeah.
and so command control economies is nothing new to me. I mean, when the prayer call hits at 5 o'clock in Indonesia, everybody rank falls out, and because they hear the imam making the prayer call, it's very clear things get done. I've seen these, huge factories that my dad was part of, that I could visualize even up to this day. So I don't know leaders who say, you know, I admire you, leaders like you, consultants like you, who are pushing the envelope and suggesting another alternative. Like, could we give some dignity, human dignity to work, to how work could be conducted? Because I came from a culture which is like, you know, let's just get this done. So, and I can't say that it's um all dreary for them, because I saw a lot of happy faces after 5 o'clock when we went for the prayers, because that kind of work environment suit that community. So I want to bring that, well, I hope it's, yeah.
Um, we live in a different time, and there's more options today. I mean, you mentioned that sort of memory from when you were very young. I remember in my dad's shop, my dad co-owner of a diesel repair shop, heavy equipment. And I can remember they had this horn, that sounded really loud, at noon to signal,
Mm,
okay, lunchtime, and so people could, take their lunch break. And there
mhm,
was also one that went off. I think it was like 3:15. There was a 15-minute break in the mid-afternoon, 3:15 to 3:30, and the horn went off 3:15, and it sounded again 3:30. So it's like, okay, you can take your break, and it's like, okay, back to work. And people usually, I would see the mechanics file to the break room, or they'd go off to eat their lunch, at those times that when the horn sounded. And I remember for myself, even as a young boy, working in my dad's shop and being like, cleaning up things, pushing a broom, picking stuff up, cleaning. And, you know, there were times when the work I was doing was so boring and, mundane. I would just, as soon as that horn sounded, I'm like, oh, thank goodness. I was so glad, was like, to have the break. But there were also a few times when my dad, let me learn to do other things, like, actual repairs on the trucks and the equipment. And like, I learned how to, change the brakes on these big, semi trucks or lorries, that as you call them in Southeast Asia. And so I remember working right through break time. I mean, I heard the horn sound, but it's like I was in the middle of something. I wanted to finish it, and it's like just ignore that alarm or that horn, because I was into the work and I wanted to get the job done. And so, there's I think today the ideal is we want people to be engaged and, part of the work, like they feel a stake in it, and they're not just punching the clock. They're not just waiting for the big horn to sound like, oh, okay, I can file out. I can, I can check out. I can go home, or, stop working.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
We want people engaged, and I think that's the ideal. Um, Self-regulation is a key part of what we want people to practice at work. But I'd say you're not going to see that unless, as a leader, you're practicing self-control, self-regulation. I think you asked me this question, in fact, in preparation. You said, but aren't CEOs and leaders, aren't they already pretty good at this? Aren't they pretty, good at self-regulation? And you remember I gave you that example? I said, well, not always. In fact, sometimes CEOs are good at just a few things, and they've got a lot of other shortcomings. It's like if you only knew the real story, you'd realize, like, oh, they are very human. They really have, their own gaps and weaknesses as well. So I'm not going to prolong this and go into more examples and illustrations, but I would just say a real leader listening to this right now, you've got areas to work on. We all have gaps when it comes to self-regulation and self-control. And I actually sat down and brainstormed, like, I've got 15 different things to do to grow your self-awareness and self-regulation, to increase your self-control. So we haven't really talked too much about specifics or tips on how to improve it. That's probably something we should do a deep dive in the future on self-management, self-regulation. I suggest we circle back around to that in a future episode. But I hope you gained a few good points from our conversation about how to exercise self-regulation.
Yeah, and then I remember asking you that question, and then now new insights came for me because become aware of the question you're asking. So one of the things that I'm present to is look at your own health, look at your own addictions,
Yeah.
look at how you are using your time.
Yeah.
If any given time you are scrolling, eating chips, or doing something that just seems to be off balance, then we're not probably then we are probably not regulating well. So I'm starting to notice a little bit more now with the self awareness journey that I'm part of with you. I'm starting to notice my habits, like, oh, I think I'm not regulating well. But if someone were to look at me, they'll think like, oh, she's doing fine and blah blah blah. And no, when I step back and just look at myself, I realize that's like, there's certain things that I'm doing more often that I'm realizing that something is off. I need to take a look at that.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I appreciate you in this conversation. You've really helped me to see some aspects of self-regulation and to think about it in a different way, and to see like, hey, we all are practicing some degree of self-control or self-regulation. I mean, that's kind of what we have to do to get through each day. The challenge is to raise our game, to get better at this.
Mm.
Yeah. So I appreciate it. We're going to wrap up the broadcast now. And I would just say, if you are interested in exploring this further, get in touch with us and let's talk about your situation. And if there's maybe a potential fit that we can do something together and help you out, either on a personal level or with your company, with, more people. So thanks for watching. I'm Ron Oltmans with Lead Skill, joined by Angela, and we do the Self-Aware Leader live stream each week, and you can tune in here to our YouTube channel and catch it either live or on the replay. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in the next show.
Thanks, Ron.